Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. To you and to the ranking member, today is a very good day for the House Foreign Affairs Committee because all of these pieces of legislation really speak to the moral high ground that I think reflects American values of human rights, American values of freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom to gather. Let me just point out a couple of the pieces of legislation that I think, for me, are personal. The impacts of U.S. leadership in responding to displacement of refugees around the world is something that has always, in the past, stood out for America as a beacon of light around the world. And the refugee crisis that we have on our own borders is one that reminds us of the fact that we have a role to play. Anti-Semitism, sadly, continues to still exist around the world, and it's fitting and appropriate that we recognize the attack that took place in July 1994 in Buenos Aires, reminding all of us that, in fact, anti-Semitism still, sadly, today occurs around the world, and we must call it out for where and when we see it. Having been to Sudan, I can tell you that the resolution H.R. 432 is fitting and appropriate. The horrific violation of human rights in Sudan has been well known and demonstrated. And clearly, even with the change of the horrific regime that perpetuated the violation of human rights, we still see people suffering in Sudan. We must call it out for what it is. Clearly, America, as a beacon of religious freedom throughout our history, it's appropriate that the ethnic and religious minorities in Iraq, a part of the world that many of us have been to, in which we've expended a great deal of American resources, we must remind those in Iraq that they have a responsibility in this area. Finally, as was noted before by my colleagues, it is Gay Pride Month, and the LGBTI community has had a long and difficult journey, not only in our country but around the world. Countries in which these abilities of people to enjoy their own basic human rights, to love the persons that they choose in consensual relations, in some parts of the world we know is punishable by death, and that is simply unacceptable. And so these pieces of legislation, separately and taken together, I think make an incredibly strong statement today for the Foreign Affairs Committee, and a tribute to the leadership on a bipartisan basis that America is still a beacon of light, and that we still, as a country, can come together and maintain the moral high ground. And I think this package of bills reflects that sentiment, and it's something that we should all be proud of today. I'll yield back the balance of my time, but I want to commend my colleagues and the authors of these fine pieces of legislation, and look forward to supporting the entire package. I yield back the balance of my time. Thank you.
Gentlemen.